Alright, so in this episode we're going to talk a little bit about shading. And what I want to do is kind of waylay some bad habits, get those out of the way, and then talk about some proper technique for creating a more three-dimensional shape when you're shading. Okay, we're going to start with a real simple sphere. I've got the light source indicated in the upper left corner. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk real briefly about something that you probably, some or most of you have all done. This is a very logical thing to think of when you're thinking of how to communicate value in lighting, is to say, okay, well, if my light source is here in the upper left, then the darkest part of my object is going to be the part that's furthest away from the light, like right there, okay? I'm just using a texture brush in Photoshop so we can kind of get the idea of paper or something like that. And so what you may do is you may start with the darkest part, and you just work your way all up to that value, and then you start feathering off into the lighter value, okay? Working a little bit darker until you work up to this sort of 3D shape. You know that it's curved or it's spherical, so you're going to do this, right? And so you start to get this idea of depth, right? Now, this is an okay start. It's not great, and maybe we throw in a little bit more highlight right here, so we get, there we go. The closest part to the light is where the lightest part's going to be, right? Now, does that make sense? Most of the time, people will, when they're starting out, this is the approach that they have, okay? What I want to do is I want to show a different approach, all right? So we'll compare the two afterwards, all right? And I am going to use a clipping mask here. This is just Photoshop stuff. If you're doing traditional, please do not worry about it. So here we go. What I'm going to do, a little bit of different approach. Instead of concentrating on this being the darkest part of my piece, the one that's falling away from the light, I'm going to envision that the light is moving over the surface of this sphere, okay? And it's going to hit right in this area, not on the edge, but in that area, okay? So I'm going to get rid of that. And right along this sort of hemisphere, if you imagine this as the equator, if the world is a kind of at an axis, tilted axis, this is the hemisphere, okay? And that's the part where the light's going to, if it hits right here and starts moving down in this direction, this line right here represents where everything starts falling away, okay? And so I'm going to assert and then show that that is going to be a better option for creating the core shadow, the darkest part of your drawing, okay? I'm going to map it in here, kind of this is where it's going to start. I'm going to add this sort of, it's going to start looking like a really big line, right? Okay. And then I'm going to have everything else, midtones kind of fall off of there, which is going to be maybe kind of illogical first, but then it's going to start to make more sense as we go in here. So midtones all the way up here. Now, I'm cheating because I'm on digital, but if you're doing this traditionally, you would leave a spot here, or you'd work back in with a pencil, or an eraser, excuse me, and you'd create your highlight. Okay? And so you'd have this really hot highlight there, and then everything else kind of falls away. Now, what I think, and what I'm sharing with you guys, is that this actually creates more of a three-dimensional illusion than the other does. Okay? Because, and let's get real dark with it here so we can really see the difference. Go real dark here, and I'll work up to that shadow. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go back with some white here, and you could do this by either leaving it white on the paper, or coloring dark behind it, or using your eraser to pull some of that graphite or charcoal out. All right. Now what we have is a highlighted area, okay, and you've got a core shadow, this darkest part, and then you've got fall off, which is something we didn't have before. What this takes into account is that the light keeps going, right? If it's, I'm going to switch my brushes here, but if it keeps going, this is just going to show some direction here. I'm going to grab a different color so that we can kind of see some notes over the top here. Okay, so if the light goes down in this area, Okay. Light comes down into this area. Okay, it's going to hit right at that area, and it's going to fall off in this direction. Okay? It's going to completely leave this area in shadow. Okay? But what it also takes into account is that it's going to hit the ground around my shape and bounce back up. Okay? And so what we have is a core shadow. Right? This is the point at which the light falls off. Right? And then we also have a bounce light. This gives another level of dimension to our object that wasn't there before. Okay? So let's do a side-by-side comparison. All right? This is what we did first. Okay? And what it winds up looking like is a simple gradient, or a disc, or a plate, or something like that. But this actually looks like a sphere. This actually has volume because there's that differentiation between these different areas of shadow and highlight. The core highlight, which happens right here, that's the core highlight. Okay, and the core shadow are both working together now, and what we have is some midtone, and then some areas where everything else just gets to define the dimension and the shape of our 3D object. Okay, so what this does is it creates a different quality in the surface. It's not just a flat plane. Okay, so this gets us away from thinking about contour lines. This is more about finding the edge of a form. And what you'll find also is that if I go back here, I can get rid of the line entirely. Okay, and if I get rid of the line entirely, we still can tell where the edge is because we've defined it with value. All right, so it gets us away from thinking about the outline, and it gets us thinking more and more about the actual form of the plane that's making up this surface, this sphere. All right, so that's one of the ways that we can start to indicate roundness in form, which we're going to use in the figure coming up in this next part of the lesson.